Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what we've got wrong about habits. Habits, there's so much misinformation around habits and incorrect information. This whole neurocycle is about building habits, and a habit is something that produces lasting change. And we have easy habits to build, and we have more complex habits to build, like changes in mindsets. But as you work through the 63 days of the neurocycle, which is the system that I've developed to help you build habits, you're building a little habit every day, but it takes for the neuroplastic effect to happen, it takes around about 9 weeks. So today, I'm going to be explaining how this works and giving you some examples and lots of graphs and everything to help you understand this in as simple a way as possible. So it is a bit sciencey, but this is like a baseline for understanding the concept of habits. And we don't understand the concept of habits, we're not going to effect changes that are sustainable in our life. And that's what's happening with a lot of mental health issues, is people don't know how to create sustainable change in their life. And this is what this session is going to help you understand. Okay, so habit formation, what we got wrong about habits is that habit formation, forming a habit, is this mindless automatic repetition. It's definitely not. To build a habit, there's a lot of intelligence that goes on in little tiny bite-sized chunks. So we're building little tiny habits every day that build towards a big habit. But little tiny habits don't build a big habit that becomes something solid that will change you in 1 day or 7 days or 21 days, which is so commonly thought. It takes at least 63 days. Okay, so you'll see why. So what's wrong is that habits form in 21 days. They don't. See, these are the things we've got wrong. That there's no time frame. Some people think there's no time frame, and it's just about, each day doing something little, and then it eventually builds towards something big. But that's in itself is not an effective way of approaching it. Like if it's something simple like flossing your teeth or something, you could get yourself into doing that fairly quickly. But when it comes to, you still got to practice it, you still got to build little habits, and it's still easy to fall out of it. So simple habits one can build in a slightly shorter time, but when it comes to like real stuff, it takes a longer time. So another misunderstanding what we've got wrong with habits is that it just happens one little daily practice at a time. It's with no random end frame to it. The little things it is a little bit every day, but it's got to build towards it's got to go into the right neuroplastic framework in order for it to root. Now, something that's happened that's very emotional. So there's a lot of emotional salience attached to it, like an acute trauma that can become a chronic PTSD. So something that's big and makes an impression. All of that extra emotion and the drama around it and the trauma around it takes that experience and literally builds into a habit almost immediately, which is very interesting. So there's one circumstance under which a network can build very quickly, and that is intense trauma. Okay. And but to deal with that intense trauma, it's not just going to be one thing to fix it. And just the whole nature of how a trauma habit is built and a trauma experience is built into a habit is the fact that it is so in your face that you can't stop re-experiencing and thinking about it. And especially if the trauma is repeated, obviously every bit of repetition is making it stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. But the nature of all of the salience and the way the experience is wired in, to fix it, it's not going to go away as quickly as it came. So that if something happened in that moment, and it was maybe a moment of 20 minutes or something, it doesn't mean it's going to take 20 minutes to go away. But the nature of the trauma making it into a PTSD means that it's very strong and established. But that in itself, even 63 days is not going to be enough to fix it. So the stronger the trauma, the more dramatic the trauma, the more rounds or cycles of 63 days you're going to need. So, for example, some of my patients who had abuse or who had suffered the death of a loss, suffered the death of a loved one, that kind of thing, where it's this intense war incidents like that, those are not, they happen in the moment, they're dramatic, they embed and root across your entire network due to the intensity of the salience aspects, the emotions and so on. But they can take, they they don't go away. Those kind of traumas get stuck. It's almost like tangled bushes in a forest, and in your brain, literally, it becomes this very entangled network that needs to be unpicked. So it's almost like a hurricane bashing everything down. There's a big mess immediately. It happened quickly, but it takes a long time to clean it up. That's actually a really good analogy. Just thought of that on the spot. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. The truth about habits is that neural bundles form over 2 to 3 weeks. And neural bundles, by that I mean networks. So these little neural bundles, so little networks that form in the brain and throughout the body. Each day they're forming and growing, but they grow into over 2 to 3 weeks into an established one. Then at the end of the 2 to 3 weeks, over the next 6 weeks or so, they then become stronger and more stabilized. So that's when you are trying to fix something, you've got to unlearn and learn at the same time. So the first 3 weeks are a combination, it's a learning phase where you are finding those neural bundles, unwiring them, and at the same time rewiring them, because you can't pull them out. You've got to fix and put them in the right way, kind of pull them apart and put them in the right, rewire them. That's the neuroplasticity aspect. And you're doing that with your mind. With your mind, you're changing the neural bundles in your brain. And that takes about 3 weeks. And then once it's built, then they're very vulnerable. That's a great way of explaining it too. They're very vulnerable at the 3-week point, especially when you're fixing a trauma, fixing a toxic habit, fixing something that's hard that you've dealt with. They're very vulnerable. So you need that next 6 weeks. You need that next 42 days to make them stronger and take the vulnerability aspect out of them. And it's only when that's removed, the vulnerability is out and they're strong, that's when they'll show up in your life as you changing, as you being able to cope with that you're not completely stuck in the flashbacks of that trauma and re-experiencing all the time that you get incapacitated. If you don't fix it, that's where you'll stay. But if you go through the healing process, then that disentanglement happens, but that's shrunken, the energy's been removed and it's not so powerful. And the healing, healthy part's been changed. It's a healthy network, but there's the little part of the toxic one is still there, but it's very small, it's like encapsulated, it's small, it's lost all its energy and power. It's just like a faded memory. So you can remember there's still sadness, but it's no longer controlling you. And for something like death of a loved one, it's not going to go away in 63 days. It's going to take quite a while for you to get to that point, but there are things that you can do to speed that up. But that's not what this discussion's about. We'll do that in another session. So eventually the entangled bundles do disentangle and get weak and small as they lose their energy over the first 3 weeks. And then thereafter, they've got to go from that vulnerable new little plant or that new little beautiful neural bundle into a strong one. So this helps us to evolve and not revolve. If we don't take that trauma or that bad habit and break it down in the way I'm saying and build it up into a good habit, we just get stuck in the bad habit. We get stuck in the trauma. We get stuck in those things that have caught us. And then we just go revolving, like the revolving door. Like a door revolves, you just go round and round and round and in and out, in and out, in and out. Maybe there's a tiny bit of reprieve, but you're going round. You don't want that. You want to evolve. You want to grow forward. And that's what the whole point of doing a very guided system over the 5 steps of the neurocycles, a system that I've developed that is based on how the mind drives neuroplasticity in the mind-brain body network. It's the system for driving neuroplasticity, and you do that each day so that you can evolve and not revolve. And as you're doing it, you're unwinding all those little neural bundles. Okay, so habit formation is a very mindful practice. So it's not this mindless thing. It's mindful. So when we're dealing with a mindset change, a trauma, a toxic habit, it's very mindful and a planned and guided and sequenced way over a specified time frame, as I explained, based on neuroplasticity, and that's the 63 days. So habits are deconstructed and reconstructed in 21 days, but they're vulnerable. They need to be stabilized over the next 42 days. So this is just a summary of what I've said. So there's a time frame. This is the correct truth about habits. And this time frame is cycles of 63 days. And sometimes multiple are needed, as in the case of trauma. So a little daily practice at a time, or a little daily habit, tiny little habit daily, builds cumulatively over time. And very often people stop on the way. They'll stop at day 7, day 4, day 7, day 14, day 21, 42, 30, 36 to 42. There's certain time points that we call danger zones where you can feel like giving up or you can feel like you've got it. And if you stop at those points, you can go backwards and then you get very frustrated. So that's why you need to follow the cycle in order and it's a very logical process. It's a very cognitive process with some good body stuff that you can do with it to help you. Because remember, your body stores everything. Your mind, which is all around you, and your brain and your body. That's the network. The network's not just your brain, not just your body, not just your mind. 3 parts together, connected. Okay, so your mind's the energy, your brain is the neural networks and the chemistry, and your body's all the cells and what's inside the cells, and that forms a network of memories. Okay. So simple habits like flossing or going to the gym are built into the mind-brain-body connection a little bit more quickly because they're not as complex. So simple things you could build in quicker. But for more complex habits like changing a limiting mindset or changing a trauma, that's going to require a minimum of 63 days to make it useful. As I said, extreme trauma, it's going to take death of a loved one, for example, is going to take multiple cycles of 63 days. So in order for you to change, to get all those neural networks unwound and to build a new way of functioning and to help to, the grief doesn't ever go away, for example, but you learn to, the intensity of the grief reduces. And that's going to take time. That's directed neuroplasticity that's required. So a useful habit needs to be developed over time in a very organized way with this deconstruction and reconstruction in the first 21 days, finding the tangles, reorganizing them, cleaning them up, cleaning out the toxic energy and the toxic chemicals, rebalancing, etc. Gardening literally in your brain. And then you've got to apply the knowledge into action. And so, a useful habit needs to be developed through the deconstruction and reconstruction, as I described. Then you've got to apply that knowledge into action, keeping the momentum going. And that's what you're doing over the next 42 days. So there's these 2 phases. So here's now a graph to show you this concept of, and I call this the healing journey. And you'll be pleased to know that I'm writing a book with all this explained in depth. But if you are using the neurocycle, this is what you're going through. For those of you that, if you're not using the neurocycle yet and you're listening to this just on the podcast, the neurocycle is the system I've developed for what you do daily to direct the neuroplasticity. So it's the steps of how to do the little daily habit that build into the big useful habit in the 63-day or 9-week period. It's what you do daily for phase 1, which is the building phase, the deconstruction, reconstruction, and then the stabilizing, taking the vulnerability out and making it strong is the second 42 days. But it's an up and down journey. Every time you deal with a trauma, rewiring a toxic habit, rewiring something that's upset us, or it's maybe not a trauma, but just something that's been bad, maybe an argument or a pattern of arguments that you've got into with maybe your loved one or something like that. It's an up and down journey. So you can see there initially from days 1 to 12, there's very much an increased awareness. So at day 1, you're excited, and then there's this increased awareness. 12 days 12 to 14, we get what we call kind of like a mastery mirage, where you think, hey, you've got this now. And if you stop here, you're going to go backwards. But the temptation to stop can happen there. You can also experience a little bit of a dip at that stage as well. And then you get to days 21 to 28, and we call that the first danger zone. Because once you hit days 21 to 28, that is where you get where you've done the reconstruction, but it's still so vulnerable. You've cleaned up those little networks, the neural networks, but they're vulnerable and weak, and anything can just knock them. So you need the next 42 days. So that's the danger zone. And then you have another days 36 to 42. You get this at days 36, you get this, you can see the little guy with a super, his jacket standing on top of the peak just next to the light bulb. You get this increased insight in this time period from sort of 32 to 36. And that increased insight is an awareness of the change in you, an ability to look back and see the scope of what the bad habit or the trauma did in your life. So there's a level of maybe grief, maybe increased anxiety and depression, which are not negative. They are positive. They're a sense of grieving and a recognition of the scope because of your insight, like you're seeing more. So it's a very natural reaction to maybe feel a little sad or whatever. And that can lead to a bit of a dip. So days 36 to 42, there's this dip. That's where you see the little dip over there, where things can be very difficult. And because you're seeing what you've missed or what you could have done or what could have happened. And there's just a lot that's coming up and a lot of connections are being made. And that can be very hard. And then there's suddenly this real climb to, you get through that dip and then the vulnerability, there's a massive shift in the vulnerability every day from day 22 through 63, the vulnerability is getting less and less. But this up and down is all part of this growth. It's like healing. If you go for surgery, there's days where it's sore than others. Or when you're working out at the gym, where you learn a new exercise or you push yourself a bit harder, it gets sore before it gets better. That's the principle operating here. And then after around about days sort of 50 onwards, you see this beautiful climb where you've now built this into a habit that is useful. A useful habit means it's going to change your life. It's not just going to be, oh, I want that. I wish I could be like that. It's actually, you turn around and say, oh my gosh, I'm doing this.